around 90% of Chinese people support their government. And a lot of Americans would say, well, this is just because they're brainwashed. And while the media and education system do play a role, the main reason that Chinese people support their government is because every generation has seen improving material conditions and living standards. The children of China today live better and have more opportunities than their parents did. And this has been true for every generation of Chinese people since the 1949 revolution. Meanwhile, here in the United States, public trust in government is at an all-time low. Recent polling said that only about 20% of American citizens have any kind of trust in their government. And that's because our society seems to be going in reverse. My generation has less financial opportunities and stability than our parents' generation. We're literally at a point now where our country's life expectancy is decreasing. And as a result of our worsening material conditions, we also have a decreasing support of the US government. Despite all of the brainwashing and indoctrination that we face here in the United States, you can't convince a people to support their government if their conditions are getting worse. You can't lie to people and tell them that things are going well when they're struggling to put food on the table. Especially when these problems are only getting worse year after year. The government's doing nothing to fix the increasing homelessness rates or the increasing cost of rent or the decrease in life expectancy. The US government has been letting poverty run rampant while the Chinese government has lifted 800 million people out of poverty. And that's why their people support their government, but our people don't support ours. And it all stems from the different kind of social systems that China and the United States has. China has a socialist system where labor, production, and resources are directed towards social development or achieving social ends like raising people out of poverty. Whereas here in the United States, we have a society that's completely dominated by bankers and shareholders, and their profits are prioritized over all else, including the living standards of the vast majority of the country. You can't deceive an entire population of people into supporting their government. Well, I guess George W. Bush did after 9/11, but that's an outlier. If our government was actually improving people's material conditions, more people would support them. But they're not, so people don't. Also, Ronald Reagan was not the universally beloved president that Republicans make him out to be. That has nothing to do with this video, but I just wanted to point it out because look.
Ah, shit. What's poppin'? This is my boy Eddie. My boy Eddie is out here educating these folks about China. We don't have China derangement syndrome here in the RBN community. We don't buy that. Our boy Eddie putting out banger after banger. Our guest, James Rewald, he put out banger after banger on TikTok. I saw a few of them today as I was doing my research. I was like, God damn. This is why they try to ban TikTok right here. No one is buying Empire talking points no more, and you're going to see how the establishment is not happy about that. In fact, they are smearing young people for this. I refuse to condemn other governments as we live in the most violent empire in human history. Why should I hate China when the people in China don't hate their government? Someone explain that to me. As we live in the most violent empire in human history, where Congress in the United States has a 14% approval rating, but you guys want me to spend my time hating China? China, who does this? China property. Beijing launches $41 billion of funds to buy unsold homes. So what they're doing, China is going to buy up unsold homes and provide them to low-income citizens. As we have millions of people who live homeless in the United States. As you have people that say, oh, China is capitalist. Well, this is the kind of policies we want. We want war against the landlords and real estate developers. You have China where the average rent in China is $500. The average salary in China is $49,000 a year. They have free health care. They have amazing public transportation, so they don't have the cost of travel like we do. We have to have a car where I live. There is no public transportation where I'm at. So they have less cost on the cost of living, less cost on travel, a functioning healthcare system, actually beautiful infrastructure, but we're supposed to hate China? China, who hasn't launched a war in 40, 50 years? It was the 70s the last time they had the war. Where are China military bases all over the world? Don't worry, I'll wait. As people want us to dislike. I openly admit I'm very impressed with what China have been able to accomplish. Lifting their people out of poverty and challenging the Western hegemon. So you have Putin, who was on a 2-day trip in Beijing in China, where they essentially doubled down on their no limits partnership. Once again, this is another reason why I am in favor of putting pressure on the ruling class regardless of where they're at. But apparently China is 100% okay with their government. They're just going by polls. The support for Xi Jinping and the Chinese government is sky high. You guys see why, and Eddie explained that. So there's no reason for me, as someone who pays taxpayer money in our country, to spend any time. That's just my personal opinion. You can disagree with it or not. It's okay. It's okay if you disagree with me. This is not an echo chamber. I love the conversation I had with Nico and Misty. We don't have to agree on everything. It's just my opinion. Why I do not see the value of us being overly critical of China, seeing what they're doing in the world right now. They are building Africa, forgiving Africa debt, and we are bankrupting them. I want to see Africa thrive. In China, and this is in polls in Africa show this as well. I covered this. Polls show that Africans must prefer to do business with China over the United States now. And it's going to get worse as time goes. That's why we see in the United States and France and the West being forcibly removed by many countries in Africa. Niger being the most recent example of this. So I have revolutionary obligation where I want to make where I live better, because even if I was to move to China, because I'll be like, if you like China so much, why don't you move there? For one, I don't know the language. That's kind of, and I will admit that's kind of scary and intimidating to me to live in a place where I don't know the language. And I heard learning Mandarin from English is one of the hardest language transitions that there is, especially later in life. So that's to answer the question. That's why I don't move. And the second reason is because of revolutionary obligation, where I can't convince. I got a big ass family, fam. If I can magically convince these people to move to Brazil or China with me, I'll be gravy. But even if I was to move to China or Brazil, I will leave my family behind. I can't do that. Like there are people in my family who cannot imagine. My mom, for example, she can't imagine living anywhere else, because that's how Americans are brainwashed. They can't imagine living anywhere else. But as I study international politics, as I have this international leftist coalition that I'm building, as I hear from people from other countries, as I have professors from Bet Beat Media who live in China, who explain the reality of China, as I have my hotspot brother Nico who literally live in Brazil, as I have our sister Josana who was in Brazil, as we have all these people internationally that tell me how great life is outside the United States, my mind is completely decolonized, and I'm 100% okay with living outside the United States. But we have revolutionary obligation. Revolutionary obligation, my friends. I am okay with, and it's a very strong possibility that I may go to Brazil with my boy Nico House. Because my dream has always been to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under a legit Brazilian black belt in Brazil. Like it's like a highlight of a martial artist. That's all. So I may go away for a while. I may go away for like 5-6 years, but my heart will always be revolution at home, because the reality is my family, the people I grew up with, the people I love, they will always remain here. And even if they leave, they may have kids that live here. My niece gonna stay. I can't imagine my niece leaving this country within the next 20 or 30 years. So there will always be revolutionary obligation. But with that said, oh yeah, you got to teach me. There are a lot of languages you guys got to teach me, because one of the greatest criticisms I take on the chest is my ability to mispronounce many of these foreign names that we be talking about, because I'm a victim of American education. I only know one language. I took Spanish and Japanese in 2 years and didn't learn a goddamn thing. That's just the reality of what it means to be an American. So one thing I'm going to do to improve my work as a citizen journalist and my ability to travel internationally is I'm going to learn a few languages here, and it's going to improve my work significantly. I'm debating on what languages I want to learn first. Portuguese definitely is number 1 and 2 because my ties to Brazilian jiu-jitsu and my love of the Brazilian culture. So Portuguese number 1. And I heard from Zoya and many of my friends that if you're going to be anti-imperialist, and I've been strongly thinking about this, never in a million years I'll ever consider learning Russian. But in the time that we're in right now, especially as a citizen journalist, they said the best thing you can do is actually learn Russian because the West mistranslates shit all the time. The hug that was heard around the world. Actually, let's lead with that because it shows how powerful their relationship is. And guys, feel free to roast me. I want to get feedback on this because I'm fucked up about this because I got this trial for the New York Times because I want to show you guys what they say. But man, even with $1 a month, I don't want to fund this shit at all. What do you guys think about this? Because I feel fucking dirty. You guys see how I got the New York Times open? Because I'm like, no, maybe I should get the $1 free trial so I can open this shit for you guys. I don't know, man. What do you guys think about that? I feel so dirty. Fund them even $1 a month, bro. It feels dirty. Let me know if I should cancel this shit. If you guys think the RBN community should ever have any, I don't know. But this is for the New York Times. Putin's China visit highlights military ties that worries the West. I see another headline where they talk about how this military cooperation that in this new trade agreement where they're going to trade, it's going to be over 95% of all exchanges is going to be in the yuan and the ruble. And during this visit, they was highlighting the fact that we need other countries to follow our lead as well. We need other countries. Let me see if I can fix this damn link. I'm trying to get the hug pulled up. Oh, Jesus Christ. Did this link just break? Let me pull this hug again. The link I just had just broke. I'm sorry, guys. Let me try to pull it back up. Because this hug, based on what I've read, like hugging is not like extremely normal and it's not like normalized in Chinese culture like it is in ours, especially among world leaders. So I'm explaining, like, look at this. This is crazy. This is crazy. And that was definitely planned and tactical. Definitely planned where you have, like, you would never see a statesman in China like hug another world leader. This image here is being talked about all over the world now. Their aggressive push for de-dollarization. And you even have China that criticized the West for funding Nazis in Ukraine. You have Putin and Russia. They came out and said that they strongly support the Chinese peace proposal. The Chinese peace proposal that the West condemns. And now you guys see, there's so many of these Western media stories I can show you guys. I don't have enough time. The cope of the West. Putin's pomp-filled China trip underscores the limits of Western pressure. Because what the West been doing, the West have failed to put pressure on China because they were like, hey, China, we're going to put sanctions on you. We're going to put economic pressure on you if you continue to support Russia as they're fighting Nazis in Ukraine. If they can support the military, the special operation in Ukraine. They threatened China for having ties with a close neighbor, having trade with a close neighbor, as the United States funds a hostile terrorist apartheid regime that is located nowhere close to a in terms on the map. We're funding their genocide. But we have the nerve to tell China that they can't do business with Russia. You guys understand this is why Niger kicked us out? Because Victoria Nuland visited Niger and told them that they can't do business with Russia, and they told them to go fuck themselves. The increased sanctions because China is quote-unquote supporting Russia during their military operation in Ukraine is exactly what's going to accelerate de-dollarization. Blinken heading back to China with a threat over military aid to Russia. Do you guys see how the hubris and the arrogance of the Nepo babies who are now in charge of the empire is now, it bit them in the ass? Because now, because of this, especially because of Russian sanctions, it led to nations all over the world realizing that the United States will punish them economically if they do anything that the United States disagree with in terms of foreign policy. Now, I'm going to show you guys the Chinese peace proposal that Putin and Russia praised. No one in Western media ever explained to you guys what the Chinese peace proposal actually said, which is actually 100% reasonable. Whenever you see, I'm trying to find another link. Here, I use this one. Putin-backed China's Ukraine peace plan says Beijing understands the conflict. See, you see, almost like these sites don't want you to visit them. I've seen so many crazy headlines. Maybe see if I can find another crazy headline for you guys on this, because I've seen some crazy ass shit regarding this. China peace plan Ukraine. What they'll say, China is complicit with spreading Russia propaganda. China is complicit in spreading misinformation and endorsing the crimes against the Ukrainian people, because he outlined his plan early on. And you want to know who endorsed the Chinese peace proposal? Lula from Brazil, for example. Modi in India. You had world leaders that govern giant populations that were supportive of the Chinese peace proposal. If the world population followed the Chinese peace proposal, there would be no genocide in Gaza. It would solve a lot of the crisis of imperialism and colonialism that we are dealing with right now. And how is China and Russia the bad guys for accepting these terms? Respecting the sovereignty of all countries. Now, how many channels actually go over the Chinese peace proposal with you guys? Because there's so many people who have Chinese derangement syndrome. And Chinese derangement syndrome relies on remaining ignorant and not understanding what they're actually saying. They're talking about building houses and infrastructure, building up Africa, and creating world peace. But people want you to think that China is evil, authoritarian, and they can't even define the terms that they are using. Number one, respecting the sovereignty of all countries. And what's extremely important about this, and this is why it's critical for the West to reject this, because there's no greater block, no greater actions of evil that disrespect the sovereignty of nations and people more than the West, the United States, the UK, and their actions of evil. When you have the CIA that helps neo-Nazi fascists in Ukraine coup a democratically elected government, that is direct violation of number one. Anytime you guys are intervening and interfering with these countries in their elections, like the United States has done to all over the globe over the last 50 to 60 years, that's directly in violation of number one. When you have referendums, like when you look at Odessa, when you look at Eastern Ukraine, they had the referendums that said they want to be independent from the state of Ukraine, which led to the neo-Nazi fascists in Ukraine to shell and murdered and torture anyone who supported these referendums, who was critical of the fascist regime in Ukraine. That's why Russia came in. That's what the NATO left don't tell you guys. Referendum after referendum. In eastern Ukraine and Odessa, they support Russia. They was critical of Russia for not coming in before because their sovereignty was violated by the West. And what Russia wants, they don't want to take over Ukraine. They want Ukraine to respect the sovereignty of these eastern countries who want to be independent of Ukraine. Meanwhile, in the West, Boris Johnson, every single corporate head talking point, every single politician will tell you that Putin's goal in Ukraine is to take over Europe, which is bullshit. Number two, extremely important, especially me as a socialist, as a Marxist, as someone who wants to see the advancement of the global working class, abandoning the Cold War mentality. The Cold War, I don't even like call it Cold War as you read more about it. That's like the Western framing of it, because war implies two sides are fighting. The Cold War was actually the global class war waged by the capitalist class in retaliation to global class consciousness rising. Repeat after me. We do not accept the narrative and the education that come from the West. The Cold War was a global class war waged by the capitalist class, punishing global population who was standing up to their capitalist oligarchs, their feudalist oligarchs. And when in China, in Russia, and any sane person in the world should want to turn the page on that. Ceasing hostilities, essentially talking about ceasefires. I got to speed up my segment here, because I can rant on this all day, my friends. My guest is coming here very soon. Ceasing hostilities, resuming peace talks, resolving the humanitarian crisis, protecting civilians and prisoners of war, keeping nuclear power plants safe, because you know Ukraine loves attacking those, reducing strategic risk, facilitating grain exports. You know the grain exports that the Ukraine and the West pretend they care about? Stopping unilateral sanctions. Once again, I can do a 30-minute segment on this alone. You guys see how China is calling for the end of the sanction regime that the United States and the West have been promoting? That's why no one in the West supports the Chinese peace plan. And once again, how many channels are explaining this to you? They're not explaining this to you because they want you to hate China. What part of any of these asks are unreasonable? What part of these asks are we supposed to be upset about, my friends? These asks are why I have a lot of respect and admiration for China and what they're doing. This is why the West refuses to accept this, and this is why Russia is all on board, because the Chinese peace proposal matches what Russia wanted to gain with the operation. I see you, James. Welcome to RBN. I'm going to introduce you here very soon, my friend. Give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready. Appreciate you having you here. I think that's my I can round this all day, man, because I think I have another short live we'll play tomorrow. What was my last thing I want to show you guys? So during this summit, you have, as I mentioned, Putin backed this peace proposal I just read to you guys. You know the evil Putin, he supports everything on the list. The West viciously rejects it. The corporate media lies to you about it. Now I'm gonna show you guys what Putin said, because I was reading the transcripts on these meetings between Putin and Xi, because it's always super interesting. Once again, they will never show you this stuff on corporate media. They want you to think Putin and Xi is so evil, but they will never show you what they say. Isn't that interesting? It is necessary to carry out education on the correct historical perspective, protect the world's anti-fascist memorial facilities. You guys see, Xi Jinping always speak out against fascism. That's why the West hates them. Protect those anti-fascist memorial facilities from desecration and destruction, and severely condemn the glorification or even the attempts to revive Nazism and militarism. So we have one side that's condemning Nazism, the other side propping them up, inviting them to their parliament and giving them golden medals. But you guys want us to hate China, fam?